Now, I don't know how often our special announcements or our big announcements live up to the hype, but many of you have been taking guesses at what we are going to announce this morning as the second hour begins. Thanks for hanging out. Jackson, Lucas, and me with you until 1 o'clock. Now, we've gotten a third party to come in here and to potentially announce the news. It's Greg Cosell of NFL Films. Greg, are you here to tell me that the radio show is over, that it's going to be the Lucas Panzica show, and you're going to co-host from 10 to 1 weekday Central Time? Is that what's going on?
Say it, Greg.
Buck, you're done. I meant to tell you.
You're out of here.
It's like the old George Carlin routine, and everybody's a winner until they're not winners, and it's like, Bobby, come on in, you're fired. Get out of here.
But Greg, I still have 2 hours of the radio show left to do. Do I finish the show and then I'm fired, or what's the deal?
No, but I think you're okay, Buck, from what I understand. That's what I'm told. Okay,
well, excellent. The reason that Greg would have any level of insight to that, other than he's probably got more high-level sources than I do, is the fact that we are going to put on another live episode of The Install with our good buddy Greg Cosell of NFL Films at the Analog at the Hutton Hotel on Friday, May the 2nd. Give me some fanfare. Give me some crappy radio imaging. Yeah, no, that's reckless speculation.
You specifically asked for it.
All right, Greg, we're excited, aren't you?
Hey, you know how much I love coming down to see you guys, and how awesome was it last year? Hopefully it's even more awesome this year. I'm pretty excited about it. May 2nd feels like a long way off, but you know how that works, Buck. It happens real fast.
And this is going to be a fascinating draft. I mean, Greg, I know we're going to talk about some larger themes from the 2024 season today. We're going to do a live episode of The Install today on the radio show. And then a live episode of The Install on May the 2nd. Tickets are available at 1045thezone.com. It sold out with a month to go last year, and obviously we had Rand Carthon participating in the show. We'll wait a little longer before we announce special guests and things of that nature, but the tickets are on sale right now, starting at $30. If you want the best opportunity for the best value, now is the time, 1045thezone.com. for more information. It's a fascinating offseason, Greg. They need everything, but they also need quarterback, which is going to be compelling to see how this whole thing plays out.
Very compelling. I think this quarterback class is going to be polarizing. I think you're going to see a lot of people with different points of view. They're all valid based on tape study. I've actually, believe it or not, Buck, I've actually finished up 3 guys in detail. I'm done with Cam Ward, with Jackson Dart, and with Shadir Sanders. So I'm done with my evaluations of those 3 players, and nothing's going to change me because it's all based on tape study. So that's I've done those guys. I'm actually watching a fascinating guy, believe it or not, this morning, because yesterday, of course, I spent all day watching the Super Bowl, but today I'm actually watching Tyler Shuck from Louisville, a very, very fascinating player.
Got a lot of love coming out of the Senior Bowl, and obviously has had a good deal of collegiate experience across multiple transfer opportunities. Greg Cosell of NFL Films here with us. The announcement of the day is that The Install Live is making its return, the 3rd annual tradition at the Analog Hotel on May the 2nd.
So, Greg, with your evaluation of Ward and Sanders, I know you guys will be talking a lot about it on the Install podcast for the course of the next few weeks, but can you kind of just give us a preview, some insight into maybe where you have landed on Ward and Sanders specifically relative to what you thought about them at a very surface level before you took a deep dive into the tape?
Well, Lucas, the funny thing is Sanders I've actually watched for 3 consecutive years. I watched his season at Jackson State. I've watched his last 2 in detail at Colorado. Ward I did last summer at Washington State, and then I did him obviously this year at the U. We don't want to give too much away now, Lucas, but in my view, based on, and this is purely on film study, I hope people understand, I don't know the players personally, so, and that factors in a significant way, certainly at the quarterback position, but just based on film, I find Ward to be a meaningfully better prospect. Now, I don't mean he's a 10 and Sanders is a 3, but I think Ward, based on tape study, just, to me, fits the NFL game a little better, and to me he was number 1.
Well, and it's if there was a consensus top quarterback, Greg, we were talking about this yesterday on the show, we would know by now. Like there would be no hiding it.
Right.
from anybody. Just the same with Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence or any of the Caleb Williams. We knew for months at that point. We knew at the end of Caleb Williams' collegiate season he was going to be the top pick.
Yeah, and and even someone like Jackson Dart, who I've also finished, I think he's very much in the eye of the beholder. I mean, remember last year, Bo Nix was the 12th pick in the draft, obviously had a tremendous season under Sean Payton. And as you know, Buck, because we've been doing this for years, I finished Bo Nix last February, well before the draft. And in my transition notes, I said he'd be a perfect fit for a Sean Payton offense. And that's exactly what happened. So sometimes players are, have fit a system. They're in the eye of the coach, because the difference between scouts and coaches very often, not 100%, is coaches tend to think in terms of scheme adaptability. Obviously, they look at traits and attributes, no question. I mean, it's like a receiver. If you run a 5.2, you're not going to be a receiver in the NFL. But, all things being equal, coaches tend to think, how does a player fit into my scheme? And, so I thought when I watched Bo Nix, man, did he fit into Sean Payton's scheme? And I think Jackson Dart is going to be one of those guys that a coach could easily fall in love with his game and think that, hey, he fits what I do.
We'll have many months to talk about the draft prospects with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. You can subscribe to the Install Podcast. Obviously, we do the podcast each and every week. Today, it's live because we've got the announcement for the live show. Tickets are available at 1045thezone.com. You can pick them up starting at $30 today. There is also, as always, a VIP option, which Greg and I always enjoy doing the happy hour with the VIP attendees before the show begins.
But that was a lot of fun last year. We had a really good group for the VIP, and that was a lot of fun.
Listen, Greg, we've got back-to-back sellouts. I mean, these things are a great time, and it's an awesome thing to be able to interact with the fans and for fans to be able to ask you. And last year, Rand Carthon questions. It was really cool of him to come down.
That was terrific. But that VIP part, and I hope people understand that, that is such a fun time, because it's an hour of just, kind of talking without it being official, where we actually sit down and do it, which is great also. But, I got to interact with so many fans last year in that hour before, and that was really a fun time.
And also a full bar. What's better than that? Greg Cosell here with us.
And food. You can't leave out the food, Buck.
That's right. I know Greg was hovering over the hors d'oeuvres for a good portion of the VIP hour. Absolutely. So to that point, though, Greg, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about positions in the draft class. We'll obviously do a live one of these at the Combine, because you and I are both going to be there. But specific to the 2024 season, you just talked about your quarterback evaluations or your profiles that you did heading into last year's draft. Relative to your expectation, or what your expectation was based on the film that you saw from these guys, and we can keep it to the quarterbacks, were there any of them that exceeded your expectations, or was everybody basically kind of did it play out how you thought it might?
Of the guys I've seen, it played out as I would say I probably liked Dart a little more than I thought I would when I was finished with his 2024 tape, because I did him last summer as well from 2023. And, I kept watching Dart, because I end up watching with quarterbacks in particular, Buck, and you know this, we've talked about this. With quarterbacks, I end up watching 7, 8, 9 games. I just get caught up in it because it's just, they're quarterbacks, and I just can't help myself, So Dart ended up being a quarterback that I liked a little more than I anticipated based on what I saw from his 2023 tape. I would say Ward and Sanders were relatively the same. I mean, you always see certain things, and I'm not going to sit here and read my notes now. We'll have plenty of time for that. But I would say Ward and Sanders were pretty much what I expected based on what I saw on their 2023 tape.
Greg, looking back at the 2024 quarterback class, we were coming off of a year where multiple guys were thrown into situations that they clearly were not ready for, right? With Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson and Will Levis as well, just drowning a little bit, C.J. Stroud being the exception. And then you turn around in the 2024 quarterback class, exceeded expectations for the most part, Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix in particular. What kind of situations do you think those players were in that allowed them to thrive, as opposed to a player like an Anthony Richardson that had all the tools, or a Bryce Young that the developmental path clearly was much, much longer? Like, what made Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels' situation conducive to success in 2024?
Well, it's interesting, Lucas, because, you talk about all the tools. I would say, and again, this is all based on tape. As I said, I don't spend a ton of time with these guys. I don't know them personally. But I would say that's not the case necessarily with Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson. Bryce Young's in a tough spot because he was a number one pick in a draft, so therefore people expect him to be great. But he's a certain kind of player, and therefore he needs certain things around him in order to be successful. Bryce Young is a shorter quarterback, does not have a big arm, needs to be protected, needs the interior of an offensive line to be really, really good because that controls the depth of the pocket. He needs space. At his best, he's really an efficient ball distributor, and he's an executor of an offense, and he needs a complete offense to be effective. And they started to do a better job of that as this season progressed because Hubbard had a very good year for Carolina as a running back. Richardson is a fascinating guy because obviously the size, the power arm, which is ridiculous, but his ball location is just really all over the place. And sometimes you watch a quarterback and his ball location is just not as precise as you want, but it's okay. Richardson is totally scattershot, Lucas. He's all over the place. And maybe every once in a while he makes a great throw and you go, man, that is just big time special. But he's all over the place. And it's hard to succeed in this league no matter how big you are, how physical you are, how far you can throw it. If you really can't place it where do you want to?
Because the discussion here, Greg, is about if the Titans take a quarterback with the number one overall pick, they could certainly trade out. They could certainly take an Abdul Carter or whoever. But if they were to take a quarterback, there would probably be a baseline expectation for the number one overall pick at the quarterback position to play immediately. So just kind of trying to draw the comparisons of what set up some of those rookies for success last year and what the Titans do and don't have in that regard. What are two or three of the baseline factors that you think have to be in place for a rookie quarterback, unless they're a Joe Burrow, right, or an anomaly, to have success in their rookie year?
Well, in some ways, Lucas, it comes down to the individual because take someone like Drake May. Okay, Drake May actually played pretty well this season on a team that had a below-average NFL offensive line, very little at the wide receiver position, a very inconsistent run game, yet he performed well. And he was probably in the toughest spot of any of the quarterbacks. I mean, he was a number 3 pick in the draft, and he performed well. So that probably speaks to who he is as an individual. It's funny. Caleb Williams obviously got sacked a ton, and teams do these kinds of studies, Lucas, where which I can't do. I'm one person, so I can't do a study where a team could have 5 people, doing these kinds of things. But the study says over time that quarterbacks that get sacked a lot in college get sacked a lot in the NFL. And Caleb Williams was sacked over 80 times in 2 years at USC. And it's very easy to say that, the offensive line wasn't great. Just like that's what you're going to hear about Shedeur Sanders. The offensive line wasn't great. And he got sacked a ton. But I got to tell you, when I was listening, doing games, obviously I was at the Super Bowl, so I didn't hear Tom Brady on Sunday. But I've heard Tom Brady a number of games this year, and he knows a little more about the quarterback position than I do. Just a little, but he knows more, And he kept saying a number of times that sacks are on the quarterback. And I believe him to be correct. Unless it's a true jailbreak, which rarely happens, sacks are on the quarterback. And you just wonder, these guys that get sacked a ton in college, is that going to continue in the league? We'll see with Caleb Williams this year with Ben Johnson, who's obviously terrific as an offensive coordinator in his route concepts and combinations. But Caleb Williams has to learn how to play with a much more refined sense of timing and rhythm.
And Colorado, bottom 10 in college football in sacks allowed with 43 last season.
And it's funny you say that because Shedeur Sanders, one of the things he has to clean up is he has a tendency to retreat backwards. And you can't retreat backwards in the NFL. The only guy that can do that on occasion and get away with it is Lamar Jackson, but he's a freak. And Shedeur Sanders is not that guy. So, they're all these guys, by the way, even the guys from last year, Lucas, when it was a really good class, they all have things to clean up. No one comes into the league as a finished product. So they all have things to clean up, and they have to accept the coaching part of it.
The BYU game, a great example of that Shedeur trait specifically, Greg, running out of the back or retreating when he is trying to avoid pressure and taking sacks that go for, I think there were losses of 16 yards or almost 20 yards on a couple of the sacks that he took in that bowl game. Greg Cosell of NFL Films, the only person who I heard mention Milton Williams as an impact player as a part of his pre-Super Bowl analysis. Here with us on 104.5 The Zone, the live show announced for May the 2nd at the Analog Hotel. Tickets are available with me and Greg and everybody else. We had a sellout crowd the last 2 seasons. We're going to be breaking down the Friday after the NFL draft, whatever it is that the Titans did, and we're looking forward to that with you. 1045thezone.com is where you can go. Greg, we talked about it on a week-by-week basis, and I know that overarching themes are a little tougher to kind of assign value to, but on the whole, how would you summarize the Titans' offensive experience in 2024?
Not very good, obviously. Although there were some definite highlights. I mean, under the circumstances of a very erratic and inconsistent quarterback situation, I would say Tony Pollard really played at a high level. I mean, it's hard to do when the pass game is a week-to-week proposition and you just don't know what you're going to get. And I thought he ran tough. I thought he ran hard. I mean, he's not a 230-pound back. He'd probably be considered almost more of a scat back type. But I thought he ran really hard, really well. I think the O-line continues to be a work in progress. I would expect Latham to continue to get better. I think the question for Mike Bergonzi and staff, and I really like what they've done with the whole staff, bringing in McKenzie, who's been around the league a long, long time. They have really good people in the building, is whether Latham stays at left tackle or moves to right tackle. And obviously, if you move him, you need a left tackle. But let's assume he stays there. The right side of the O-line needs really to be addressed. And, I will say this, Buck, and I don't remember if you and I have discussed this, but I learned this a long time ago from a really smart GM, that I don't know how they're going to evaluate the quarterbacks, but if you evaluate, if the number one quarterback on your board is the 25th best player on your board, you can't take him at number one. You have to take the guy who's number one on your board. It's just, to me, I learned that, and I think that over time, yeah, do you get lucky once in a while? Yes, but, I think that most teams would tell you you've got to stay true to your board, and it's so exciting, especially if you feel, and I don't know what this new group thinks of Will Levis, but let's assume for the moment that they don't think he's the guy. Let's just assume that. Then you're thinking, well, we need a quarterback, and it's so easy to draft one, even if he's the 25th best player on the board, and I think you have to be careful about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to tell us a lot about where they think their timeline is. And, of course, we have no idea where these players are graded on their board, nor will they tell us that information.
No,
Greg.
Of course. But let's assume for the moment, just for the sake of discussion now, that they're two highest-rated players. Just sake of discussion. You and I don't know, Buck. Let's say it's Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, for sake of discussion. Those are positions the Titans need. So, if that's the way it works, then you got to take one of those guys. Yeah. Unless you're trading out.
Greg Cosell, NFL Films, here with us on 104.5 The Zone. Greg, we talked a lot about this Super Bowl before, in the lead-up, obviously, before we talk about the season at large. The way that it played itself out, I think the thing tactically that most surprised me, and maybe you weren't, maybe surprised is not the word that you would use there, but the fact that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, I expected them to take a couple of series, try and identify what the Eagles' keys or rules on defense were, and then, work their way into exploiting them the way that we've seen them do time in and time out. And it never happened against that Eagles defense, Greg.
Yeah, and as I was watching the tape, Buck, I was trying to think to myself, because you know me, I'm a process guy, so I was trying to think, when they were starting their game planning, what made them take that approach? Because here was the approach. 4-man D-line pass rush. Okay, 39 of 42 Mahomes dropbacks were a 4-man pass rush. I think 2 of them were sim pressures where Bond might have been the 4th guy, but essentially it was a 4-man D-line pass rush. Every single play started with a 2 high safety structure, and more than 75% of the defensive snaps they played out of a 2 high safety structure. So as I'm watching the tape, I'm trying to think, how did they come up with this? And what I basically decided, and I since found out it's the reason, but they just believed, and they turned out to be correct, that their front 4 was better, more athletic than the O-line for the Chiefs. And with all the stunting they did beginning in the second quarter, they just dominated physically and athletically that offensive line, which quite frankly has three players who are not truly starting players. Joe Tooney is not a tackle. He's a really good guard, but he's not a tackle. Caliendo at left guard should not be a starter. And Jawan Taylor has really not been a very good right tackle for quite a number of years. So there were three guys on that O-line that were just not up to the task against that Eagles D-line. And the Eagles clearly felt that, and the way it played out, you could say they knew that going in. And with all the stunting they did, I mean, the athleticism just took over.
Well, Greg, I am excited to have you in town as always. We can't wait to put the live show on, and I know the audience is excited to be a part of it again. Looking forward to it, my friend.
Oh man, Buck! I like I said, I can't wait. You know, I'll be grinding until the draft. There's no time off for me right now. I wish there was, but people always say to me, "Well, aren't you done now?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be done on about April, whatever date that is." But now it's just grinding, watching college players.
I feel like I'm imagining you just in a dark room, Greg, while the entire city of Philadelphia burns around you during the celebration.
Well, I'm not in a dark room, Lucas, because then I fall asleep. So I can't do that. But I imagine it's, I guess the parade is here on Friday. We had some snow last night, but I think by Friday it's supposed to be okay. So I imagine there'll be some fireworks on Friday in the city of brotherly love.
There's no question about it. Celebrating that Super Bowl 59 dominating victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. Greg, take care. We'll do it again next week, buddy.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Looking forward to May 2nd.
Absolutely. May 2nd is the date for the Install Live with Greg Cosell. Greg's flying in from the Philadelphia area. We will host you all at the Analog Hotel the Friday after the draft. We will break down the entire draft class. The past 2 years, we've done it with tape cut-ups that A to Z Sports Film Room has been kind enough to acquire for us. So we've got Greg breaking down the tape for you guys in a special live edition of the podcast, full bar. Food is included with the VIP ticket purchase, but tickets are on sale and available as low as $30 today for, honestly, the event, Lucas, that a lot of other people, because Greg doesn't just do hits here. He's got Colin Cowherd, I think, here in about 30 minutes. So Greg's doing football analysis all over the country. Last year, it was interesting to me to see some of the places like Buffalo, where Greg does other work, quote tweeting pictures and videos of our event, being like, wouldn't that be cool to do here? Nobody else in the country is doing what we're doing here for what Greg is doing here for Titans fans. I won't include myself in that, even though I'm along for the ride.
It was a great time. Great time last year.
That's not a fine. Why is that a fine? I could have come in here after going to New Orleans last week and got the holy hell find out of myself. I would have loved it too. Would have loved it.
Do it.
No. Maybe later. Maybe at the end of the show. 615-737-1045 is the number. Coming up next. Do I have things to give away?
You do. 2 tickets to see the Doobie Brothers concert.
Ooh.
At First Bank Amphitheater on September 15th, the Walk This Road tour.
615-737-1045 is the number. If you want to go see the Doobie Brothers in September, all you need to do is call us and tell us what the dumbest thing in sports this week is.